All right, welcome back, everyone. So this is the second chapter that we're going through for this week. So we're talking about motivation and emotion. This first video is going to focus on different motivation theories. So we're going to talk about what motivation is and then why and in what ways are we motivated to do things. So motivation, by the way, the term motivation literally translates to set in motion. So hence the boulder falling down the hill. So there are a variety of factors that initiate, sustain, and direct behaviors. Um, so basically, we humans, we engage in a lot of goal motivated behaviors throughout our day, whether it's something as simple as like eating or drinking, or something much more complex, such as like doing a job because we get some satisfaction and some sort of reward out of it, right? So let's talk about some different theories that help inform our understanding of motivation and why we do things. The first of which is instinct theory. We're going to talk about what instincts are. Drive reduction theory. We're going to talk about what drives are and how they contrast to instincts. We'll then talk about incentive theory. And then finally, we'll talk about arousal theory. Not listed on the slide, we're also going to talk about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we're going to talk about this hierarchy in relation to motivation as well. So first, let's talk about instincts. Instincts describe automatic and unlearned behaviors that occur in all members of a species. And with more simple organisms, so they have simple nervous systems, we see that instincts are more common. Instincts might include something as like birds' migratory patterns. There are a variety of instincts that we see, but again, importantly, instincts are just unlearned. They are natural to the organism, and they're automatic, right? So they are basically, I hate using this term, but it's basically hardwired in that particular species. Babies crying, that's an instinct that we see in humans. We also see it in other animals as well. Crying, this is an unlearned thing. That's the first thing that you do whenever you enter this world. And crying serves a variety of purposes. For one, though, it's very communicative. So the parent-child relationship is very, very important. Human babies, relatively speaking, compared to other species, they are very vulnerable and in danger of potential predators. We have these massive heads and these tiny little bodies. And so we need to be cared after. Whereas if you look at like giraffes or horses, they're walking upon entering this world. And so, again, very vulnerable, so to speak. But again, I want you to know what an instinct is. And we're going to contrast instincts to this next concept here, which is that of a drive. So we talk about drives in relation to this idea of homeostasis. There are these certain processes in the body that need to be in a state of equilibrium. So some drives include like regulation of temperature, like body temperature, hunger, thirst, sleep, sex. Those are just to name a few. Whenever our internal homeostasis becomes dysregulated in some sort of way, the body has to engage in compensatory mechanisms. And oftentimes this leads to some sort of motivated behavior. So body temperature. What happens whenever you're too hot? The body compensates. You start to sweat. Your body engages in these measures to try and cool down the body. Just the opposite whenever you are too cool, right? You shiver, your hair stands on its end. It encourages movement, right? Hunger, right? We know what happens whenever we're hungry. Our stomach contracts, our mouth starts to salivate, and so on and so forth. So with each of these drives, there is a change in our internal physiology, but the end result basically is to encourage the organism to be in motion, to engage in this goal-directed behavior, to again satisfy this homeostasis and to return to equilibrium. These processes, by the way, so the actual process of bringing something back to homeostasis, that's known as allostasis. Okay. So think of all these drives as having basically like this like set point, like almost like a thermostat, right? So like with body temperature, whenever you deviate too far from this kind of preferred internal temperature, changes occur. Same thing with hunger, thirst, sleep. There are all these optimal levels that we strive to be at. And whenever you are out of whack, like for instance with sleep, whenever you just stay up too many hours, eventually sleep's going to overtake you. I mean, that's just the way it works. Okay. Okay. So I should note that, again, I mentioned with us humans, we don't have many instincts, but we do have some instincts. With drives, this is much more common in us humans. These are simple processes, though. And of course, we can be motivated by more complex things as well. So that ties into this next theory of incentive theory. Incentive theory, this describe, or an incentive rather, this is like just motivation due to some sort of external stimuli. So examples include money and status. You are all in school right now trying to get an education. That's not meeting some basic physiological need that you have, but rather that is a more complex need. So you're accomplishing something more complex, something kind of like more higher order, so to speak. And so incentives are very powerful motivators, right? Think of the number of things you do, for instance, for approval, praise, whether it be from friends or family or what have you. You have long-term goals. But again, incentives refer to these external motivators, these external rewards that help us initiate behavior. And then finally, arousal theory. So sometimes we just do things because we have this preferred level of arousal or arousal within the body. Under arousal can lead to boredom and all these different things, but or hyper arousal on the other hand can also be very bad. Overly stimulated, overly excited, that can be a bad thing. We all kind of differ in our preferred level of arousal. Some of us, we might be like thrill seeking, right? We have this kind of adventurous personality to where we seek out these adrenaline induced experiences. Whereas others of us, we are more chill, we're more laid back. Our preferred level of arousal is different. Speaking of arousal, this is going to tie into our next concept here. Something known as the Yerkes-Dodson law. And so you've heard Yerkes before. We talked about him in relation to intelligence. So here is basically what the law states. Performance increases with arousal only to a certain point, and beyond that, performance actually decreases. So we see this curvilinear relationship between arousal. So this just kind of refers to this like internal state of vigilance and energy, and performance, right? So performance over here on the left. So performance can basically refer to, like test performance or performance on really any given task. So ultimately what is being said here is that if you are overly anxious or overly excited, or on the other hand, not anxious enough, not very excitable at the current time, both of those situations can be very bad for performance. So think about that in relation to taking a test, right? Imagine you walk in and you're going to take a test and you don't care, right? You are about to fall asleep, right? You are just not there. You're not present. You probably perform pretty poorly on that test. But consider the exact opposite instance. So for instance, if you had severe test anxiety, your sympathetic nervous system takes over. Your heart is beating, you're sweating, your mind is racing a million miles per hour. That too is bad for performance. And so ultimately, we kind of want to be in the sweet spot here between low and high arousal. Another kind of moderating effect here, though, is task difficulty. So simple task this curve is kind of pushed here to the right, to where more arousal is actually better. Complex tasks, lower arousal is actually more acceptable. So we see this curve kind of shifted here to the left. Okay. So finally, we're going to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're going to play a video talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then I'll show you the actual hierarchy itself. I think this video does a decent job, though. It's kind of one of those illustration videos discussing Abraham Maslow's theory. And quickly, I always do this. Let me fix this real quick. All right, we're good now. Let's try that again. There we go.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory in psychology. It argues that there are 5 stages of human needs that motivate our behavior. Abraham Maslow proposed his theory in 1943 after studying what he called exemplary people, such as Albert Einstein or Eleanor Roosevelt. First, there are physiological needs, such as the need to breathe, eat, drink, or sleep. The moment we get enough of that and we feel awake and our bellies are full, we get motivated by the next thing. Now we want safety. We try to earn money, build up resources, and look for shelter that protects us against dangers. Once we are satisfied and feel safe, we have time to think about what we want next. At stage 3, we seek love and belonging. We desire to be close to family and friends, belong to a society, or join a gang. But the moment we feel completely part of a group, we already wish to be a little different than the rest. At stage 4, we look for esteem, self-confidence, and respect from our peers. We want to be someone. If we have money, we buy a fancy watch. If we have a brain, we write or think or work a lot. Motivation to perform and compete is now at its highest. Students, sportsmen, and inventors excel. Neil Armstrong even flew to the moon. Only if we breathe and drink and eat and sleep enough, and we feel safe and part of a group and still special, only then can we reach level 5, self-actualization. Now we can relax, be creative, accept facts for what they are, give back, or do whatever we want. No more pressure, unless of course there is trouble below. If you are a leader and believe in the theory, use it. First, make sure everyone has eaten well. Then make them feel safe and help them belong to a group. Once they feel they belong, they are ready to stand out and excel. Thanks for watching. Even if we try to keep it short, each video is quite some work. First, we research and write Maslow's.
Okay. So that video did a pretty good job of describing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That video dealt with Maslow's original conception. As you see here in this hierarchy, we actually see 6 tiers. So Maslow added that top tier, self-transcendence needs. And so we'll kind of skip over that, but that was kind of like a more like recent addition. But kind of the key takeaway here is that in order for these higher order needs to be of concern, we must first address these lower order needs. So again, physiological needs. You have to eat every day, you have to drink, you have to sleep, right? You have to take care of those basic drives. Beyond that, you have the safety needs, right? So the need to live in a sheltered area, to feel like you are taken care of and things like that, right? Belongingness and love needs, right? So we are a social species. This has been understood for quite some time. Aristotle said we are social animals. We have a need to be loved and to love others. This is a basic human need. Beyond that, we have esteem needs. So to feel like we are contributing, that we're important, that our work is worthwhile, and that we're being productive and all these different things. Self-actualization. This is a big concept. We'll talk about this whenever we talk about humanism, like in the therapy chapter. But ultimately, the idea of like flourishing into your truest version of yourself, the person that you were meant to be, the person that you were destined to be. That is what self-actualization means. And then self-transcendence. That's almost like kind of like this, like almost like spiritual type of kind of uh, thing that Maslow kind of threw in there at the end. Okay. So that's all we have for this video. Next video, we're going to return back to drive reduction theory. We're going to talk about the most complex of the drives, which is that of hunger and eating. So we're going to spend several slides discussing that. We'll also talk about such things as like obesity. And so stay tuned.